Silent Hill 2 is a survival horror game that was released back in 2001. It received critical acclaim and was praised for its story, characters, soundtrack, graphics, and many more things that placed it up there as one of the greatest games ever made. And playing through this game, I managed to put together plenty more trivia ranging from Easter eggs and secrets to any other points of interest that I could find. And if you do enjoy this, please show your support by liking and sharing this video, and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more content like this. Now it's time once again to enter the town of Silent Hill.
See? I'm real.
So right at the start of the game, as you take control of James, you can find posters by the cubicle exit. Here's a more clearer image, showing an ad for a club with Maria on it. So the town's psychological effects are already taking hold of James as he's starting to see images of who looks to be his dead wife. The landscape here shows Toluca Lake that Silent Hill is wrapped around, and is an actual location in northwest of England called Derwentwater Lake by the market town of Keswick that was used as a still shot for this background. Did you notice the state of Mary's letter that James carries with him at all times changes as you progress through the game? Re-examine the letter at a certain point and you'll find Mary's writing has disappeared, and further on the paper will vanish, and eventually even the envelope itself will disappear. The car that James drives is based on the 1977 Pontiac Ventura. After leaving Angela in the cemetery, you have to make your way to Silent Hill through this very long path. During this time, you can hear other footsteps moving in time with yours, as if you're being followed. What makes it even more creepy is the sound of the footsteps abruptly stopped when James does, only to start again when you move. When obtaining the chainsaw weapon on the second playthrough, you can see a unique animation. With the chainsaw equipped, James will let out a battle cry if monsters are nearby. Like in the previous game, these street names are based on the names of authors. The first monster you encounter is called the Lying Figure, and according to a game designer, the inspiration for the look of the creature came from seeing a work colleague walking into the room one day with his hands in his hoodie pockets, hood over his head, and walking in tune with the music that he was listening to on his Walkman. Throughout the game, you can find several human bodies. I won't go into detail about any symbolism or deeper meanings, as that'll be for a separate video. On a closer look at these bodies, you may be able to see that they all resemble the main character James. On Neely Street, there's a shop called Gozo's Sushi, named after the game's executive producer. While the previous game made a reference to McDonald's, It appears Silent Hill also has another fictional fast food rival called Happy Burger, based on Burger King. A reference to one of Stephen King's psychological horror novels can be found here, called Cafe Mist, named after the 1980 book The Mist. As already mentioned before about Mary's letter, there's a signboard on Sanders Street that says Magical Envelope, which may allude to the fact that Mary's letter to James progressively vanishes. Mystery author Richard Neely not only has a street named after him, but a particular building too, which you can enter. Though not essential to enter for the progression of the game, you can find written on the window this: "There was a hole here, it's gone now." However, if you choose to return here later, in the nighttime section of the game, you will find a more disturbing message now written on the wall nearby, which says, "If you really want to see Mary, you should just die, but you might be heading to a different place than Mary, James." In the room where you find the torch within the Woodside apartment building, you can inspect this mannequin. James will mention the clothing. These are actually the same clothes his wife Mary wore before she died. Inside another room is a framed photo of a cathedral which looks to be based on the St. Vitus Cathedral in Prague. In yet another apartment are more framed pictures on the wall, and though James doesn't mention anything amiss, this particular landscape picture on a closer look appears to have ghostly images of skulls. Found in the trash outside the building is a magazine article that mentions for the first time Walter Sullivan, who's a serial killer that gets name dropped throughout the game. He even has a tombstone with his name amongst the other three characters of James, Angela and Eddie. This is the same Walter Sullivan who will become the main villain in Silent Hill 4: The Room. In one of the corridors of the Blue Creek apartment building is a locked door that James will need to find the key for. Though I'm uncertain whether this is one of those random occurrences that may or may not happen in your gameplay, I thought it worth a mention that after trying the door and walking away, the door handle starts to rattle. Hard to spot and easily missed is a family photo found on the floor of the room James meets with Angela. The photo is ripped in two and appears to show on one half a young Angela and her mother, while the second half shows her hated father. The Lynn House key you need to unlock room 209 is named after Adrian Lynn, who's the director of the 1990 psychological horror film Jacob's Ladder, that the game developers took inspiration from. Another randomly generated occurrence happens in room 209 when you can hear this. For years, fans have tried to interpret what was being said, but in recent years, it was discovered to be gibberish taken from a stock sound CD, called Nightingale Voicebox Sound Effects. The clothing on some of the characters were inspired by certain people. As Jacob's Ladder is one of the bigger influences of Silent Hill 2, you can see that the look for James could be taken from the film's main character, Jacob Singer. Mary and Laura both look like the wife and daughter of Nicolas Cage's character in the film Con Air. And Maria is dressed similar to what Christina Aguilera wore, and it's probably a coincidence, but the singer's middle name is also Maria. When Maria follows James after their first meeting, you can trigger some very brief but unique responses from Maria, if you try to go off script.
The hotel isn't this way. Is that okay? Where are you planning to go? But we haven't found Laura yet.
The lying figures are not the only monsters to make a dramatic appearance by crawling fast from underneath the vehicle. The mannequins try to do one better. If you go along Nathan Avenue, you'll encounter some mannequins that launch through the air from out of the fog and land right in front of James. The Cafe Texan may be based on the real-life cafe of the same name in Huntsville, Texas, and is known to be the oldest cafe in the state. On the way to the hospital, you can see signs on a red board that's meant to say permit parking only, but look closer and you'll see it's misspelt, as it actually reads permit parking only. This Texon gas station is a fictional hybrid of two real-life gas and oil companies, Texaco and Exxon. A cheeky thing that the developers do with the mannequins is with the radio. Usually it would warn the player of a nearby enemy, but in this case the radio remains mute if the mannequin is frozen on the spot and only sounds off when the monster begins to move. This makes it terrifying, as you're more likely to bump straight into one if you're running in the dark. See on the wall of this building on Nathan Avenue graffiti that reads "Obedience or Die." This may be referring to the Order, who are an evil cult that eventually took over the town and even tried to birth a dark god into the world. In the Silent Hill Historical Society building are a group of framed paintings on the walls, including one showing Pyramid Head. But it's this picture that really looks out of place. On a clearer image, it looks like possibly members of Team Silent. What makes it creepy is the person here looks out of place, as he looks like a ghost. A rare encounter happens within the two separate prison chambers, where you can hear an invisible monster saying what sounds like the word ritual over and over. It's not a threat to James, and you can just move on with the game, but you can shoot it dead in its cell and even see it bleed. And what makes it more disturbing is when you kill it, the monster lets out a human scream. Though I'm not sure if this is a randomly generated occurrence, it is one of the few jump scares of the game. Go into the female toilets and go to the last cubicle. James will knock on the door, walk away, and then you'll hear this. In the prison yard is a gallows with nooses to represent James, Angela and Eddie. But those representations go even further with 3 tablets you have to find. Confirmed by Konami, these tablets are the Gluttonous Pig, which is Eddie, the Seductress, which is curiously for Angela, and the Oppressor for James. Any further elaboration on the meanings will be saved for a future video. In the labyrinth, you can find an optional path that you can completely miss, but if you go in that direction, then you'll eventually find Pyramid Head's domain, where you can collect his weapon, the Great Knife, to use for the rest of the game. Just be aware that Pyramid Head himself is in the passage outside. When James walks up the steps to the hotel, the camera position is similar to the last part of the 1989 film Pet Sematary, which is an adaptation of a Stephen King novel of the same name. If you try to make your way to the 3rd floor where James and Mary stayed, you'll find the landing blocked, forcing you to go back downstairs. You may even hear a random call out during your playthrough. Silent Hill 2 also has a UFO ending that wasn't part of the PS2 original release. This ending appears in later versions. By collecting the blue gem at the start of your 2nd playthrough and using it in key locations, James will get abducted by aliens, where he'll meet Harry Mason, who's the protagonist from the first game. There's another game joke called the dog ending, which either requires you to get all 3 of the main endings, or getting the rebirth ending on 2nd playthrough to get the chance to pursue this one. James will discover that this dog was behind everything that's been happening to him. Hey guys, if you made it to the very end, then thanks for watching and I hope you enjoyed this video. As I already mentioned, I could do more Silent Hill content and talk about its lore and symbolisms and characters if that's what you want. Mention that in the comments below. And if you haven't yet, please show your support by liking, sharing and subscribing to the SalopianGamer channel so you can stay up to date on future videos like this. I'm now doing Tomb Raider Legend playthroughs, so look out for that next. And until then, bye everyone.